have any kind of glamorous opening statement, but I'm certainly excited about the season being here. Excited to see our guys go out there and do the one thing that I can't do for them is start to gain some experience. I can put them through a lot of drills and try to teach them how things are going to happen, but when they go out there for the first time and get knocked over and have to look at the official, tell them to get up off the floor, I can't do that for them. So I love the group. I think they have great potential long term, but we're at a phase where this is a team that'll look much different than last year's team because of the lack of experience. But we feel like they're the right type of kids that we want to continue to build the program with, and eventually as the season goes on, you'll see this team improve like we hope most of our teams will. And our hope is to play our best basketball once to turn the calendar and it hits 2019 and we start playing Big 12 games.
You went ahead and formally named Cam, Thomas, and Lindy as captains. What was your thought process in doing that?
It was actually a team decision. It wasn't something that I don't believe it's my responsibility to name their captains. Every team that I've been on that's had great success has been led internally by the players. And what I mean by that is not that they're going to call their own timeouts or sub themselves in, but they're going to manage each other. They're going to manage what happens in our locker room. They're going to be able to manage, whatever issues may come up so that, as a unit, they can achieve what they've set as goals for themselves. And my job is to help them, in the games, but also help them prepare on how to get through some adversity.
I think averages-wise, you guys lost 4 of your 5 top scorers. Who do you kind of expect to step into that role?
I don't know. I don't try to decide those things. We try to put a system in place that gives us a chance to win. Whoever scores the most points is really completely irrelevant to me. I just want a group of guys who play unselfishly. For the most part, I think we did that last year. We want to certainly be the hardest playing team on the court every night. I think we did that for the most part, besides maybe a handful of games. And I want a bunch of guys that want to be coached, that have a desire to get better. And we've got a group of guys who want to do that. So I hate to not answer your question, but I don't have an answer for that in terms of who I expect, because I don't have an expectation. I know we've got 3 guys who've been through a couple seasons here and know what's going on a little bit more than the other guys. So I expect them to lead. I don't necessarily expect them to score all the points, but I expect them to help the other guys figure out how to help us win.
Do you think you have a starting lineup in mind, and how close are you getting to that?
I'm not close at all. In fact, I'd say this is probably the first time that in my career that I didn't have a really good idea of who would start or who I thought would start. And I think that's healthy at this point because it creates a lot of competition internally, and there's no sense of complacency or comfort with anybody on our team. But I think there's also an understanding that everybody's going to have opportunity. No one feels like they're going to get dismissed here in the early part of the season.
How different is this for you now? I mean, last year, brand new, young coach. Now you've had some success, and even though you had a lot of new guys, it's your second time around. How different is this for you than one way?
It's only different in terms of it being a different group of guys. For me, the job remains the same. I've tried to approach it exactly as I did last year in terms of my job every day is to come out and be a teacher, to try to educate these kids the same way that they're educated in their English classes or their algebra classes or whatever it is, but just as it relates to basketball. And I try not to make it all about the game. I've got a greater responsibility to these young men. This is college athletics. So my job is to try to impact their lives in a way that they can take lessons that gives them opportunities to be successful people when they leave here. And so because that's the way I approach it, from season to season, that won't change. The outside expectations and what people think of what's going on will only be seen based on the games we play. And I get that, and that's how we'll ultimately be judged. But I've tried to be really conscious about, my job and the staff's job is every day to make an impact on these kids' lives that give them a chance to have success in their life later on.
How much are you looking forward to Wichita this weekend, just to find out what it looks like against that caliber of group?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in seeing how we respond to not knowing everything about each other. We'll have a somewhat of a feel for who they are, but very similar to us, they got a fairly new team as well. We're probably two of the top 5 newest teams. We're probably younger than they are because they probably got a couple more junior college guys than we have. But I know what we're going to get in terms of their style of team. They're going to play really hard. Their coach is going to get after them. And it may be a pretty physical game. And I think our guys need that. They need to have their eyes open before we turn the lights on and put some butts in the stands.
You mentioned the competition you're having as you sorted out the starting lineup. Where in particular do you see the most competition?
It's everywhere. And I would say, for instance, inside, they're all freshmen. So, I mean, Cam's down there, and he's like the old man, and a bunch of guys who, like, just hopefully trying to do what he does. On the other end, we got a good mixture of guys who've been through it, but a few guys who haven't. So the competition is really fairly even around everywhere and every position. But what I will say is, as a group, they're a really competitive group. And you can see that off the court. You know, we got a pool table in there, and every time I walk through the locker room, there's somebody talking junk to someone else as they're trying to make a ball. You know, and that's what you need. You need a group who has a healthy, competitive nature about themselves, and that's something we've seen for the first 2.5 weeks of practice.
Leadership take any form? I know at post you're awfully young, and there's not a Mitch Solomon around to show these guys what it's like every day, day in and day out. Are you seeing some leadership develop? Yeah,
I mean, not necessarily on a basketball court as much at that position, just because, again, if there's ever a day where Cam has to go to the bathroom for 15 minutes of practice, there's just the blind leading the blind down there. We usually have to send a second coach to help. Because you can't teach quick enough for these guys. They're so young. They haven't been through any of it. And while we appreciate all their talent, their ability to develop, they're still not there. And that's okay. We knew that when we recruited them. But we believe in who they are and what they're about, the work ethic they have, and we believe in our ability to make them better. So the leadership is still coming from our staff on the court, but off the court, those guys are certainly looking out for each other.
With how young you are, how valuable is a guy like Mike Cunningham?
Really, really helpful. Just one less guy that you're speaking Japanese to. Because I feel like I'm speaking Japanese sometimes out there when I'm saying what I think are very, elementary things. And again, that's okay. It's not anything bad. It's just different. And sometimes for these guys, practice, they're just trying to survive. Like, they mean well, but they just can't wait until it's over, because that means they made it through another day, instead of trying to embrace the learning and the development. And that's natural. I told those other guys, I told a bunch of those guys the other day, I was an 18-year-old freshman at some point, and I'm not sure I was as wide-eyed, but I remember having some struggles trying to figure out, how do I get on the court? How do I do anything right? You know, I thought I was quick, and then I got hit, and you're not as quick when people hit you. So it's the same thing for these guys. And having Mike Cunningham around just as one less guy you got to teach every little detail to. You say something and it clicks. And so that's certainly a benefit.
Do those freshman post players all bring something a little different? Body-wise, they're all, a little bit different than each other.
Yeah, they're all different skill-wise too. Mo is probably the most skilled. He may be one of the most skilled guys on our team in terms of overall basketball talent. Can really, really shoot. Can really pass. Can probably guard 3 to 4 positions. He's got a really strong center of gravity, so he's not able easily to be pushed around. Can rebound well, but just doesn't know what we're doing yet. Contravious doesn't move as well, doesn't have as many different skills, but when he catches it inside, you feel pretty confident that he's going to be able to get a good shot off, because, one, he's probably got pretty good position, and you're not going to be able to move him from where he wants to be. Gets pushed around all the time. But he has unbelievable knack for shot blocking. And he's blocked shots being out of position because it's a natural thing for him, and he's pretty nimble. He knows how to move and has great length. And Duncan has a really, really smart kid. And so because of his intelligence basketball-wise, he's been able to kind of edge out a little bit a couple of the other post guys just because he picks up things really quickly. He's been been coached really hard, and I mean, his coach was, I mean, I wouldn't say crazy, but he was a high-strung, very, very demanding guy. So he laid a great foundation for him to take seriously how to learn, how to study. And, you know, if I teach you something, it's your job now to learn it. You know, I'm not coming back tomorrow and teaching it again. So he's got a great sense of responsibility in that regard.
I don't know how busy you've been today, but have you seen the new stuff they're doing with the G League?
You know, I'm not totally averse on everything, all the details, but I don't like it. I'll say that. I just think what we're doing in general is we're sending a poor message that we're de-incentivizing, if that's a real word, education. And, you know, again, I said I'm a teacher, and I think our job is to incentivize education and to encourage these kids that going to school, like, it's a big deal. Like, we should be trying to do everything we can to get these kids as much college education as possible. And we shouldn't be shunning them off and pushing them off to a professional league so that 3 or 4 years from now they can say they made $300,000 or $400,000, and none of them have much more than a high school diploma and don't have anywhere to turn, you know. So, you know, what I've heard of it, I don't necessarily like. I like that we're trying to find ways to do it. I just think that the conversation is starting in the wrong place. It's starting with the money, and actually that's not the place to start it at. And I get it. High major head coach making a lot of money. I get it. People say you're a hypocrite. I was saying the same thing when I was making $36,000 at Wofford College. That education is much more valuable than making a couple $100,000 at 20 years old. Because if they have the right education, they'll be able to make much more money for a much longer period of time. I'm convinced of that. And I think our job as educators is to try to get these kids to understand the value of their experience in college, not just playing the game. One of the most undervalued parts of this experience for all these guys is the opportunity to meet people who can have a great impact on your life forever. It was true for me. I still talk to my college coaches multiple times. They're some of my greatest mentors. Eddie Fogel I played for 1 season when I was 18 years old. And he's as big a supporter and helper for me in my career as I could ever imagine happening. If somebody offered me $125,000, I would have missed on that whole thing. And 15 years later, I wouldn't be where I am now. So, you know, I don't love that we're trying to make this all about paying these kids a few dollars. You know, we're pacifying a problem that's much bigger than what we have an opportunity to do in terms of impacting their lives.
Do you have a fix? Do you have a suggestion?
I don't, but I'm certainly willing to go have the conversation and be a part of that. And if anybody wants some ideas, you know, I'll sit down and brainstorm as much as I can, because I think we have to get back to encouraging kids to not only go to school. Now, are there guys who are outliers? Absolutely. LeBron James didn't ever need to step on a college campus, right? Because his basketball talent has carried him now for, how long has he been in the league? 15 years? That's different from a kid going to the G League for 3 years and just hanging on, and at 20 years old, he's got no recourse. He hasn't even been taught how to manage the money. So how far is that? What is it, $125,000? So $375,000 we're talking about for a kid. Sounds like a lot of money to an 18-year-old, but as adults, we have to convince them that that's not the big picture. That's very short-sighted. So I think that part of our job is to try to figure out ways to take care of these kids, but to educate them. You know, it's not about the books, it's not about the classes, it's about the education. And those two things are different, but sometimes they're conflated into being the same.
I know it's early in the evaluation process of your team, but have you just noticed any outliers to this point of kind of what your strengths and weaknesses will be as a team moving forward, or is it just too early to tell? It's
a little early to tell. You know, and I've said this before, Isaac Likely has kind of separated himself from the rest of the pack in terms of, and he's ready to make an impact on our team. He also doesn't understand how hard it is to win in college. He just doesn't. He's never done it. So when he comes out for the first time, he's going to be more prepared than the others, but he's not going to understand how hard it is to go on the road and win, which we'll do for his very first college game will be a road game. You know, and that's where the older guys always have an advantage early on. You know, Lindy Waters and Cam McGriff, they know what it's like to go in Allen Fieldhouse and try to figure out how to get out of there with a win. They've done it, you know. And so Isaac is going to walk in there at some point this year, and his eyes are going to be wide open, and his ears are going to be ringing after the opening lineups are announced. And so I can't teach him that, but ability-wise, he stands out in practice. But there's been times where all those guys have had great moments. I've seen Yor make an impact in our practice for a 10-minute segment where you're like, wow. And in a year when he gets stronger and understands and is not just trying to survive practice, the kid's going to be a really good player. And the same for Kentravius and Mo and Duncan as well.
Thomas, Cameron, and Lindy, you know, folks talk about, okay, these guys are our leaders, but how do each of those guys lead?
They're all very different. Thomas is probably the most talkative. People who've been around him know he doesn't mind telling people that he thinks he's really good. And I like that. I want all of our guys to have great confidence, and we try to pour that into them because this game is played best when you play with confidence, no doubt about it. And so he's very talkative, very vocal. Cam is more of a, you know, just do as I do kind of guy. And he carries a pretty stoic demeanor. Doesn't speak a lot, but when he speaks, people listen. Lindy has a pretty good balance on both. He'll get out there and show guys. He'll also be fairly vocal when he needs to be. So they all bring different things, and they all have different skill sets, which is helpful also because they help different guys on our team. You know, Lindy and Thomas can't necessarily help Kentravius, but Cam can. Cam can't necessarily help Cunningham or Ice, but Lindy and Thomas both can. So they all bring something a little bit different.
How do Lindy, Thomas, and Cam all interact with each other? Do you see much of kind of a bonding among the three of them as leaders, or are they more doing their own thing?
No, I do. In fact, I try to spend a lot of time. I sometimes call myself an over-communicator because I want these guys to have a very clear understanding of where they stand with me and what I expect. So all throughout the summer, I mean, I knew pretty early on that, you know, we were going to need those guys to show that they've been through this, that what practice, how do you approach practice, you know, and when you have a good practice and coach says that doesn't mean you don't have a good practice tomorrow. So I've spent a lot of time with those guys, you know, throughout the summer and even into the fall of explaining to them what we need, and they've really embraced that. They've been able to pull these guys together. And again, I don't know everything, but I don't need to. As long as we got good leadership inside the locker room, then I'll have a chance to help them on the basketball court.
Do you start the season, Mike? Go ahead, Cliff.
I'm sorry.
No, that's right, man.
I didn't hear you.
You're good.
When you walked in the door, you had to deal with the Ron Evans situation. How much of your time is spent monitoring stuff like that, or is that something that's done above your head? And did you have to make some changes given that?
Make changes in terms of
just trying to keep up with what people are doing, those sorts of things.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I really haven't, to be honest. I got the same staff I've had. You know, I respect all the guys that work with me. None of these guys work for me. We all work for Oklahoma State University. We all serve this basketball program in this community. And I feel very confident in the people that we have here trying to help do what our mission is to impact these kids' lives. So, no, I don't micromanage people. I believe in the people we have and the character of the people that are within our organization. But I'm aware of everything that's going on. I've said that from day one. I don't act like a guy who, I mean, I don't worry about things, but I try to make sure that I'm at least aware of what's happening and what's going on, especially as it relates to the program that ultimately I've got to answer for.
Ask you about culture. Do you sense that the guys in your program have a clear picture of what to expect from your culture compared to when you started a year ago? Has that been established after 1 year pretty clearly?
I believe so. And part of the reason I believe that is because, you know, last year going in, we had inherited a lot of guys who had been recruited already. And, you know, part of what we tried to do last year was manage what we had and establish through them what we were going to be. But at the end of the year, and it's been no secret. I had conversations with every player on our team, and I wanted to know whether they wanted to be here. And I explained to them what being here meant and how that looks for them and how it looks for our program as it relates to what the expectations are. And so we only had 3 of them on scholarship that made the decision that this is what they wanted to do moving forward. And I have no problem with anybody who's not here. But between those guys and the guys we recruited, they have received the message of what it's about and what the expectations are. Doesn't mean that they always get it right, but that means that they're clear about when they don't, what the consequences are as well.
Does that make your job easier?
No, because they're still 18, right? So that doesn't mean because they know that they always do. And I've got a 5-year-old son who I sometimes compare him to, because sometimes they try to make sure that what you said is what you meant. So it doesn't make it easier, and I'm not sure you ever really get to a point where it's easy. But what I will say is and there wasn't much pushback, but there was maybe some, are you sure? With everybody last year. You really know that what you're doing here could have I'll give you an example, Devon and Zach. That was a hard moment for me as a coach in the first year. Remember, we were coming off of our first home loss against Wichita State, and we were going to play what would people consider our second good game. Wichita, we lost, and that was the first game people thought was any good, other than we lost at A&M. And with all the other things that were going around, making that decision in that moment wasn't about necessarily those kids. I'll hope that those decisions help those kids grow long term, but it was about establishing, here's what this program is about. And fortunately for us, it didn't have a negative effect, but there were people who wondered in the moment if that was the right decision for the program and whether I had calculated all the things that could have happened because of that. And I felt good because I thought it was the right thing to do. At the end of the day, there's a right thing to do and there's a wrong thing to do. And most of the time, if you go with your gut based off of what you've been taught, you can make those decisions pretty easily.
1 year in, do you feel better equipped as a head coach to manage things that come up unexpectedly?
Yeah, I do, but partly because I feel more comfortable just with all that encompasses the job. It's hard to quantify it to somebody who's never done it before, to be perfectly honest. And I said this before to somebody, I don't remember. I used to think my head coaches, whoever I worked for, acted like they were busy all the time. And if I wanted them to call somebody and they couldn't, I didn't understand it. Or if I wanted to meet with them about something and I don't have time, it just didn't make any sense to me. And now I get it. There's a lot going on, and you have to be comfortable having the right people around that can manage some of those things, and then B, know that when you make a decision that you've calculated and been thorough about it, because you got to answer to it, however it goes. And it's easy when it goes well, but sometimes it doesn't, and you don't get to hide when that happens either.
Last question, guys. We got to get these guys to practice. Anything? Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate you guys. You guys enjoy the rest of your day and your off weekend, most of you.